wanted to tell you about my dad. My father's name is Louis Stewart, and he is a photographer. And in about 1993, I was working in San Francisco, and I got a call from my dad. And he asked if I could come see him at the office, which he often did. So I crossed a couple blocks, and I walked into my dad's office, where I had been many times. And I walked in and looked, and it was totally empty, which was a little bit strange. And there was just my dad that had a corner cubicle, ironically, if you know me, that was peeking out from behind his cube. And he looked at me and he said, "They laid everyone off except for me." And I had known some of his colleagues for many, many years because I would often visit the office. And there was one woman, her name is Barbara, and she had been working for the company, which was a public utility company, Pacific Gas and Electric, since she graduated college for 22 years. Her father had worked for the company from college through retirement, and her grandfather had worked for the company from college through retirement. And Barbara was given a cardboard box in 20 minutes and asked to pack her things and to leave. And I will never forget that moment. And it was then in 1993 that I knew that work life was not stable. It was unpredictable. So my dad, after that layoff in 1993, continued to work. He was a photographer, a photojournalist, a very passionate one. My dad loves his craft. I remember growing up in a dark room. Do any of you remember dark rooms? Are you old enough to remember? Right? Where there were baths of chemicals, and you take pictures with film, and then you'd put it in the chemical bath and hang it up on like a clothesline like we have back here. So I remember my dad always being passionate about his work, and so he worked in the news department for the company, taking pictures and writing stories. He worked in corporate communications, and he worked all the way up until November of 1999, he was eligible for retirement. He turned 65, and a month later in December, they laid him off, which was actually kind of cool because he got his retirement and he got a severance for having worked for the company, which is money based on how many years that you work with a company. But he actually never stopped. So he stopped working as an employee. Today, in 2014, at the age of 79, my dad is still doing freelance photography work for Pacific Gas and Electric. And he's had his hip replaced. He lived through colon cancer, chemotherapy. He almost died. And he came back and he's still doing photography. And so I told him, I said, "Dad, no offense or anything, but you're 79 years old. Are you telling me that in the San Francisco Bay Area, there are no capable 25-year-old photographers that could be taking pictures for Pacific Gas and Electric?" And the reason I think why my dad has survived for so long and really thrived in this environment is because he has made himself totally indispensable. He's made himself the kind of person, first of all, that loves and adores his craft. He's wonderful at what he does. But he also understands how to build relationships so that in an extremely volatile environment within his organization and within the economic situation, that he is able to remain indispensable. And I think that as long as he can hold a camera, he will continue to be taking pictures. So this is something that was really interesting to me in terms of a quality of how it is that we can be indispensable in an outside world that by its definition now can provide no external stability. Another condition I think about today's world of work is that we're always on, always connected. I appreciate that I don't see anybody really hunched over their computer or ignoring me. At least I'm only the second speaker, so maybe it'll be before. But when I grew up, I'm 47 years old. I don't know if any of you remember rotary telephones. Did any of your grandparents use those, right? It was this thing that hung on the wall. And so if somebody called you and you were outside of the house, it would And if you weren't home, it would just ring until it stopped. There was no answering machine. There was no voicemail. And so if you came home after somebody had called you, you would have no idea that they tried to call you. It was totally fantastic. Awesome, right? Now what happens? You try to call somebody tries to reach you, they don't get you on the phone, so they send you a text. And then maybe they see, because they've been following you on Twitter, that you were going to eat at a restaurant. So then maybe they tweet the handle of the restaurant to see if they can get a hold of you if they really need to. And then maybe they jump online on Google and they try to see if they can catch you in chat. Are any of you guilty of doing this? Slightly stalkerish behavior when you're trying to find somebody? But this is the world in which we live. There's a wonderful side to it, which is that we can be connected and experiencing each other in a very profound way. At the same time, we never really get the experience of just being totally disconnected unless we make a conscious decision to do so. And in a world which is inherently unstable, and things are shifting, and you don't ever really know if your job is going to be there, if your client is going to be there. With Facebook, one of the things, maybe it's just me, but do you ever notice if you have a client, or maybe if you work for somebody, that you have a boss that you're connected to on Facebook, they might say a comment like, oh man, this coworker, this person at work, she did this or he did this, and you're thinking, was that me? Was it that thing that I said? Is my job at risk? Am I going to be fired? We have so much more access to information about people's thoughts as they are developing that it can be a wonderful source of information. It can also be a source of increased anxiety, where we never get those still moments that Greg was talking about to just settle with our thoughts and to know where we are. So within this context of how we have an unstable economic environment, we're constantly connected, questioning, is the economy going to be the same? Is my client base going to be the same? Proactively, we're thinking about, what do I want to create? What's my next step? What do I want to do? We need to find a way to create stability for ourselves. If we can't rely on it from some of the traditional ways that we have found stability, which would be in more predictable career paths. It would be Barbara's situation and her father's and her grandfather's situation for many years, where you could have that good sense and that good feeling of well-being, that you join a company and you're proud to be connected and you know your coworkers and they know you, and you don't have to walk around having that anxiety if things are going to be there. That doesn't exist anymore today. So how can we actually create that stability for ourselves? I think it's by developing a very specific set of skills that are related to your body of work. So your body of work, by my definition, is everything that you create, that you contribute, that you affect, and that you impact throughout the course of your life. So this can be very tangible things like books or software code, music. We had that wonderful musician, was that you? That beautiful musician who was gracing us with your beautiful music and your energy as we were writing. I kept feeling like I want to clap after you sang, so maybe we can clap for you right now. Yeah. It's an example of something that you chose to share with us, something that's part of your body of work, right? That's a gift that you were given for having a beautiful voice. It's also part of what Jana decided to create as she was thinking about this environment. We can play music that's recorded, but how much more powerful is it when we're actually listening to somebody that's playing it live? So that's one concrete example of what you can create. And it can include things like products, products that you create. A lot of us are interested in doing that. The other thing that is part of your body of work are the intangible things. So things like love and community, a good vibe. I was calling it earlier that emotional wake. Do you know what I mean about a wake? Any of you that ride in boats or on surfboards, where it's that thing that kind of goes behind you as you're riding through the water. Have you ever met anybody that creates a negative emotional wake as they walk through the room? Might some of them be your dear relatives? You know, we all have the Uncle Joe or whoever it is that walks through a room and there's chaos everywhere. My daughter we have a little dog, a Chihuahua. His name is Rocky. If any of you like the movie, we're big boxing fans in my house. And it's so amazing to watch my daughter. She can either have Rocky absolutely snuggle up to her in his lap, or just by changing her energy, all of a sudden he's snarling and he's, snapping at her. And she loves it. She'll just be sitting there and she'll kind of shift her energy, and all of a sudden Rocky's behavior totally changes. It's kind of amazing. I don't know if she realizes what a gift that she has. We all have that gift, and we all have that choice about the kind of energy that we want to leave. It's actually the most powerful thing that we leave, totally apart from the words that we say and the actions that we take. So this is really what is connected to that body of work that you create. And I think that's really what the purpose of our life is to create a body of work that we're very proud of, that we feel represents the kind of legacy that we want to leave in the world. To be piggybacking off of what Greg was talking about very powerfully in his talk. So there are 8 skills that I think are part of building your body of work. And that's what I want to be sharing with you and hopefully working with you on in the next couple of days as I'm here. So please pull me aside and talk to me, and just like Greg was saying, to make sure that we can not just think about the concepts, but also begin to see what are the practical applications in terms of what it is that you want to develop. So the first skill in developing your body of work is to define your roots. Now, I use the word roots plural because they are everything about your values, your beliefs, these deep emotional connections that you have to things that move you emotionally. And by moving you emotionally, one easy way that you can understand emotions are something that makes you mad, makes you sad, makes you glad, or makes you scared. As a coach, often Yana will relate to this. I often am coaching somebody, and so what's your feeling? How are you feeling about that? And they'll say, I don't know. Well, are you mad, sad, glad, or scared? I use it with my kids as well. I'm saying, I'm scared. Okay, awesome. What are you afraid of? There are easy ways that we can connect, and you know it. You know that you have connected to a root when you feel it emotionally. So my husband is Navajo. He's Native American. In Canada, they call them First Nation people. The Dene tribe is the way they say it in his language. And so in Dene culture, men have long hair. So my husband has beautiful long hair. And our son Joshua, who is 9, also has beautiful long hair, which he wears in a braid. So I was picking him up from football practice, and I was driving him back home. And I said, well, how was your day, honey? And he said, it was actually a little bit difficult. He said, I went in to use the restroom, and there was some older boys in 4th grade that told me that I had long hair, and so I was a girl, and I had to go use the girls' restroom. So we stopped at a stoplight, and I looked at him in the rearview mirror, and I said, son, if anybody tells you that you're a girl, here's what you can say. You can stand straight, and you could look at them right in the eye, and you can say, my name is Joshua Little Tree Slim, and I am a member of the Dene Nation. My people have been here for over 1,000 years, and in my culture, your hair is your wisdom. So the prayers that your parents and your grandparents do for you, the things that you learn in school, the lessons that you learn, the books that you read, all that knowledge and that wisdom is held in your hair. And when you go into battle as a young man, you unleash your braid so that your hair is flying out in the battlefield, and you can bring all of your knowledge and power out to fight whatever battles that you need to fight. So I'm a boy, and it's very nice to meet you. And as I said that, I was actually raising my fist in the air. I mean, That was a roots moment. We have Malcolm X is a big civil rights activist in the US, and I was this Anglo-suburban mom with my fist in the air. It was real. I felt it so deeply down, all the way down to the center of the earth. And what I realized when I thought about that root, what it really meant, on one hand, it's like, how dare you tease my boy? How dare you make him feel embarrassed and uncomfortable and scared when he goes to use the restroom? But on the other hand, I thought, what better lesson can I teach him as a parent as to realize that exactly the way that he is made, his heritage, his physical being, his beliefs, are perfect the way that they are. And sometimes as parents, we don't want our children to suffer, and so we want them to take an easy way. It could be easy just to say, oh, it's okay, honey, just cut your hair so that you can fit in with everybody else. And we've given him that opportunity to make a choice if he wanted to. He actually chose to keep his hair long, which I feel is so amazing, and he's so brave for doing that. That is a root for me. And so one of the ways that it manifests is that I am very committed and interested in supporting people who may look different, come from different backgrounds, not be the norm that we generally see within the world of work. So I tend to encourage people that might come from different backgrounds. I want to mentor people that come from different backgrounds, and that becomes part of my body of work. Now, it's a passion and a feeling that I have based on who I am and what's important to me, but it's also something that I do for my son, because when my son sees people that are fully being themselves, that are a little bit different from the norm, that are powerful and confident and standing in positions of authority and power, then he can also feel good about who he is. We have another term that we use because my son is Dene, he's Navajo, and he's Anglo, obviously. You see me. And so we call our children and children. They're Navajo and they're Anglo. They're not half. How can you be half anything? I mean, really, when you think about it, I mean, he's 100% Navajo and he's 100% Anglo. He's an and. So the other day we were watching television, watching the president. My son goes, Mom, our president is an and. I said, yes, he is. His mom is Anglo and his dad was African. And you can see that moment, that little glint in his eye where he feels that connection. In Navajo, you called it ke. That relation that you have with somebody because you share that with them. Now him and our president are going to be connected because they have that shared experience of being an and. So for you, as you are walking through your life and your path, one of the things that you want to do is define what are your roots? What are those things that make you put your fist in the air, that give you great joy, great delight, that gets you really excited about what it is that you want to build? That's the first step. Now the second step is to move the slide forward. There we go. And to name your ingredients. Your ingredients are traditional skills and strengths that you might have, the kinds of things that you would put in your LinkedIn profile or on your resume, concrete things that you can contribute through the world, the ability to sing beautifully and play the guitar, which is a skill an ingredient I wish that I had, I don't. So, but it's also your scars. It's also the learning that you have gained through experiences that have been really challenging. When I was 16, I came to Europe, and I was an exchange student in Switzerland, in Neuchâtel. Do we have any Swiss folks? Oh, you studied in Neuchâtel. Oh, how lovely. Ah, enchanté. I guess you know who I am because I'm on stage, but okay. So I was an exchange student. I grew up in California in the Bay Area. My parents were divorced, so my mom was a single mom. I had worked since I was age 12, but I was your typical California hippie girl. You know, we'd go to school and everybody was kind of do their own thing, which is very California. So I arrived in my first day at Gymnase in Neuchâtel, and we were all sitting around the desk, and the teacher got there. And all of a sudden, everybody started to reach for their bags and pull something out. And all of a sudden, like a clockwork, which is a very Swiss thing, they all placed this little bag in front of them. And I was very perplexed because I did not have one. And as soon as the teacher started to teach, everybody unzipped their little bag, which was filled with different colored sharpened pencils and a ruler, and they began to take the most impeccably beautiful notes I have ever seen in my life. I was just amazed and shocked and feeling quite embarrassed, actually, because my notes looked nothing like that. Is that just a Swiss thing, or was that also a German and a British and... Right? Okay. So what I learned as one of the many experiences I had as an exchange student is being in that position of feeling uncomfortable, realizing that the way that I was raised and the way I looked at the world was actually quite unique and different. And I learned how to get comfortable with things that were very different, to just note it and observe it and say, wow, you know, what are they doing and what is this and how can I learn how to do it? I will say we generally were very careful to be very respectful of all our wonderful Swiss family and friends, but there was another exchange student with me, Jim, and we would write each other letters. It was before they had Facebook, this was 1984. And we would write each other letters, and we would do it in very careful lettering, and we would use the ruler, except when we had to send it to the city. And we would kind of laugh hysterically, because under the city name, we would put a squiggly line. And we imagined the Swiss postmasters probably shutting down all the production because you need to have a very straight line. It was our one little way of having a little bit of fun and expressing creativity, which I hope they took as a sense of humor. But this is an example of an ingredient that I gained. It actually ignited a passion that I had for studying abroad. I lived in Mexico and Colombia and Brazil after that as an exchange student in college. And it's a particular ingredient that now I find I use in many different ways as I do my work. I also have weird things, like I'm a black belt in mixed martial arts because I love martial arts. And that's kind of a unique, different ingredient for a 47-year-old suburban mom of two. But it comes in handy, right? If these guys get out of line, I'm not worried about it at all, because I know I'm kind of worried about you a little bit, but not really. So all of us have this amazing array of ingredients, and you can think about it as a cupboard that is filled with these different kinds of spices. So one of the things that perplexes us as we're looking to build our own body of work and our career and our work is we have this feeling that we have to dump all of the ingredients into that one recipe, which actually tastes quite distasteful. You need to explain how your mixed martial art background mixed with the international experience and being a coach and whatever else it is, which is quite confusing for you and everybody else. The way you can think about it is that you have these ingredients available to you, and as you are going through a step at the next stage of your career for what you want to build, you can choose the ingredients that you want to pull out. And it's actually interesting too, because maybe you have some that you haven't used in a while. Things that you learned when you were in school, or experiences that you hadn't thought about so much before, that maybe make you a little bit unique and different compared to others. So as you reflect on this piece of building your body of work, this is the kind of thing that you want to be including everything. You want to not leave any ingredient off, and I would say especially those ingredients that we have been socialized to leave off of the LinkedIn profile, to not talk about with friends and relatives, with abuse or neglect or all of these other things that can feel like just a painful experience. Brene Brown, who's a wonderful author who did a very powerful TED Talk, many of you may be familiar with her book, Daring Greatly. One of the gifts that I feel she's given so much to the world through her body of work is permission to be talking about things that we have felt shame about. Because as she's saying, that's really our true path in order to really create what we want to create. And when we realize that those experiences and those challenges are the kinds of things that actually give us strength and make us unique, then that's where we can really begin to build a body of work that makes us indispensable. But first, what you need to do is you need to take assessment about what your different ingredients are in a broad sense, so that you know what it is that you're working with and how it is that you actually want to do that work. All right, the third thing is to choose your work mode. And this is something I think that is very wonderful for us in today's world of work, where we have so many different ways that we can earn a living. And I think I've been in business for myself for 18 years. The first 10, I was a consultant to companies, which I really enjoyed. And then for 8 years, I worked with people in early stage entrepreneurship of leaving their corporate job to start a business. And one of the things I started to notice, especially at the end of the time that I was doing that work, is that there is a very strong, very common theme that you see, which is working for yourself is the only way you can be free and unique and creative. And if you work for anybody else, then you're basically boring and scared and not a risk taker and not somebody that I want to be associated with. I find this extremely insulting to all of the wonderful people who are contributing amazing things to the world through their choice to be working at a company and working with others. There's nothing magical about working for yourself. If you do work for yourself, you know that it is fraught with adventure, intrigue, terror, danger. And I think actually what happens when we begin to worship a work mode is that we lose sight of the work that we're actually building. That's one of the things that Greg said this morning, is if we're just saying, I want to be free, I want to be creative, I want to be a nonconformist, and that's the only thing that we're looking for, we're missing the fact that it's not just by working for yourself you can do that. You can express yourself in many different ways. At different stages of our life, we can choose a different work mode that fits the best for us. So maybe at a certain age, you love to work for yourself, and that's what you want to do. And then you decide that you're ready to be around more peers and colleagues and have a direct deposit paycheck that goes into your account on a regular basis every 2 weeks without having to go into a panic mode and send out invoices for the 13th time to the same client. And that's something that you can really choose to do. I have a colleague of mine, Jeff Moriarty, who is in Phoenix, where I live, and he worked for Intel, for a large technology company, for many years. He quit that in order to do consulting. He did a lot of social media consulting, helping businesses to use social media to market their business. And because he was really good at what he did, he organizes a lot of events locally. He's been a big volunteer to start a lot of local events. He got noticed by a local television station, and they began to bring him in to feature him on segments that they would do about social media and technology. So after doing that for a while, they ended up offering him a full-time job at the television station, running all their social media for the station, as well as being the on-air commenter about technology stories. And he said that after a few weeks of working there, all of a sudden he woke up one day and he went, oh my God, I just changed careers. Like, I work in television. I had no idea that I was doing this. It was just really a revelation for him. He wasn't a journalist. He didn't go to school for that. That wasn't what his vision was. But because he was focused on building his body of work and not really worrying about, was he an entrepreneur or was he an employee, it really opened up possibilities for him to be working in different ways. So it's something I really want to encourage you to be thinking about, is we do have so many more opportunities now for ways to work, and please do not get trapped in any kind of shame or the thought, if you happen to choose to work for somebody else, that there is anything wrong with you, that you're not a highly creative person, that you can't be free if you work for someone else. I think it's kind of funny because we start businesses to be these free entrepreneurs, and then what do? We hire people. So what are we saying about the people who work for us? Right? I love my employee, Sheila. I couldn't live without her. I'm so thankful that she chooses to work for me and my company because it allows me to do the kinds of things that I want to do. So it's just a thing. It's just a work mode that you need to choose. But as you're looking at what's next for you and as you're building your path for your body of work and your career, think about what kind of work mode works the best for you. Now, the fourth skill, this is really a skill that can only be developed by experience, is creation and innovation. I met Jana, as she said, 3 or 4 years ago. And when she told me that she was deciding to put on this event, I was so excited. As she said, I was the first person that she talked to. I felt thrilled. I had never been to Berlin before, and I was so excited to come and meet all of you. And she was so enthusiastic and excited about the event. So I was like, of course I'll come. I would love to be there. And so the months went by, and I noticed she was preparing things. And then, a few months into it, we had a call on Skype. And I was checking in. And I said, so, how's it going? She was like, it's really hard. This is so difficult. And I won't share the entire conversation, but, we're all friends here. And she said things like, it feels like when I'm trying to sleep at night, there's a gigantic ton weight on my chest. I feel this anxiety from putting on this event. And as a friend and as a coach, I knew that it was really important that I was there to listen to her and to process the experience, and also that I could help her to sort through and figure out, was this thing that is now happening right now supposed to happen? Was it part of her path and her body of work where she should be putting the energy into it and suffering the natural parts of the creative process in order to make it happen? Or was this the wrong direction? Was this something that she thought she should do that was actually going to cause her great emotional and physical and financial distress? That actually was not something that really needed to happen. So we had the conversation and we ended it. And I said, you know what, any way that you decide to go, you have my full support. So if you decide that this was something that was not meant to be, that's okay. And if you decide that it's worth to continue, then it's okay. And it was a couple weeks later that I got a quick message from her, and she's like, I'm totally on track. Don't worry about it. I hope I didn't freak you out. Like, keep the date on your calendar. And I just had a big smile on my face because I know from having experienced it so much myself that those moments of sometimes sheer terror and frustration and anxiety are the creative process. And there is no way that you can learn how to develop that skill without creating something. It is impossible. You could take a course, you could pay thousands of dollars, you could attend seminars, you could listen to inspirational speakers talking about what they built. The only way that you are going to develop the skill of knowing how to create and execute things and live through it is by creating and executing things. Here in Berlin, I'm really excited in the next 2 days to go to the former Berlin Wall. So I was reflecting on that. I thought, you know what? In 1961, I believe, which is when it was built, for somebody, whoever it was, or whatever group of people had the idea to build it, from their perspective at that point in history and that point in time, that was a good thing that they were building. They were choosing to create something in reaction to what it is that they saw in their environment, where they felt that they needed to erect something, which ended up being the Berlin Wall, which separated families, caused great angst and anxiety, and it wasn't until 1989 that it actually was able to come down, which was something that a group of people, a movement of people, maybe some of your relatives, decided that it was time for that to come down, and the taking down of the wall became the thing that was actually needing to be created. So sometimes we glamorize and we talk about building things to to think it's only something that would be of positive benefit to the world, but that's actually a choice. Many, many things have been created. Weapons of mass destruction are things that people have created based on what they feel needs to be created. And a lot of what my mission is in life, as we're connecting each other with roots that we each have that are related to creating that kind of world that we want to create, as Greg has said so eloquently, is making sure that those things that we're building are going to be things that contribute to the good of our world and our society. That's a choice that we make. But it is through the process of creating things that we learn about ourselves and that we learn the skill. And that is one thing that I cannot stress enough to you as you leave here and as we're thinking about how it is that you want to apply the learning that you have here. You will experience the learning through creating a specific project, and it can be something really, really small. It's in fact much better if you start with something that's very small, and then through that experience and through pulling the specific ingredients that you want to use and put in that experience is where you're going to get used to it. Now that Yana has lived through this experience, and now that all of us are here and very grateful to her for having done it, she knows that when she does this next year, can I say when? Okay, I can say when. So when she does this next year, she's not going to be alone. We're going to have this shared experience. What I ask of you very specifically is that you help to build this next experience. Because whenever you're the first person who does it, like Yana was brave enough to do, that's where you take all the slings and the arrows. And she's going to benefit from that personally because she has that warrior-like reflection on what it meant to be the first one. But you can all help the next time so that she doesn't have to experience all of that the next time around. That's how a movement starts, is by one person choosing to take a step in that way. So knowing what it is that you're going to create, and very specifically what you're going to create in the next 12 months, is a really critical part of what you do. And as we look at things like experience delivering baby sheep and kickboxing and being a coach, that's what I'm going to encourage you to do, is to think about what are ways that you can be pulling some of these interesting, unique parts of your experience into this next endeavor, and creating it in such a way that it's going to bring you joy, but also contribution to the world, and make you feel good for having created it in the next 12 months. Nothing ever gets created without fear. Fear is an absolutely natural part of the process of creation. And there often are motivational quotations that are shared on Facebook and inspirational speakers who will say, crush the fear, don't worry about it, get brave and just walk through it, and, prepare yourself so that you can deal with the fear and then you can, move forward. I have never found that to be the case. Most things that I've done of any significance in my life have been accompanied by great amounts of anxiety. And fear is actually something that's blasted to us. It's a physiological part of how we're wired. We have this lizard brain that's right at the base of our brain that's constantly blasting messages. There's not enough to eat, somebody's here to kill us. There's not enough to eat, somebody's here to kill us. That's how we've actually remained alive for a long time. It's a protective force that stops us from doing bad things like stepping into traffic without looking, or taking huge financial risk without having any sense of what we're doing. It is a skill that is developed, and the more that you develop the skill of harnessing the power of fear and yet being able to surf on that wave, not have it take you down, is something that is essential for creating a powerful body of work. And there's a young woman, her name, well, now she's in midlife, but her name is Ruby Bridges. And in 1960 in New Orleans, she was the first African-American child that was brought in to integrate the schools in New Orleans. And there are some iconic photographs, you might have seen them, of her walking to school on the first day at 6 years old with 2 men in front of her and 2 men behind her. She was the first child in the whole United States to ever go in and integrate a school. And she's this tiny little child that was walking to school. And as she said in her own words, it was, She didn't really have any sense of what was going on. They had taken a test when they were thinking about integrating schools, and they tried to make it as difficult as possible to try to keep African American students out of schools. And there were only 6 that passed the test, and she was one of them. The white parents of the students there did not want their children going to school with African American children, so they pulled all of their children out. So she was actually the only student in the school when she went that first day. And as she walked to the school with these guards with her, people were insulting her. They were screaming profanities at her. They were throwing things at her. There was a mother who threatened to poison her food. I have a 6-year-old daughter. I cannot imagine what this child must have thought at that moment. And she went into school, and for many weeks, no other parents would let their children go to school because they didn't want to go to school with her. But there was one teacher that agreed to show up, Mrs. Henry, that sat with her in the principal's office and studied with her. And over the months, slowly, some other students would come. She actually needed to have armed guards that would walk with her to the restroom for her safety. So this was just within our lifetime that this is happening. And when I think about the kind of courage that this young lady needed to have in order to make what was an inevitable, natural part of making our society a more equitable and just society, I am in total and complete awe. And she said that the lesson that she learned from that experience that was the most profound was to not judge people by the way that they looked. I thought, wow, there's a lot of lessons that you could have taken from that experience. And to take that particular lesson, which is one that she uses with compassion and grace, I thought was amazing. So it's not to diminish the natural fears and anxieties that we have under much less extreme circumstances, right? We can't always control the experiences that we have. Some of you have probably lived through experiences that many of us might not have had the capacity to live through. For whatever reason, that was your path for how it is that you are where you are on this earth. But the experience that we have of fear is the same. So if we were to hook up probes to our brains for somebody that's going through an experience, like Ruby Bridges did, and somebody who is sitting there trying to write their book and going through extreme procrastination and writer's block, it would probably look about the same. Physiologically, it's the same. When I was writing Body of Work, I went through a period of about 2 months where I just could not write, and I would spend 13 hours on Facebook and, just mess around and not write anything, and I started to just get so embarrassed and beating myself up. And I have this wonderful friend named Michael Bungay Stanier, who is from Australia originally. He lives in Toronto. And he was kind enough to just take me under his wing out of pity for the just blubbering mess that I was. And he got on Skype with me, and we were talking, and he would do simple things like say, just write 500 words a day, or just write any words, but at the end of the day, send me an email that says how many words you've written. You don't have to write anything in the email, just write the number of words in the subject line. So I did. And one day we were having a conversation. I said, I just feel like such a loser. I'm not Dan Pink. I'm not Nancy Duarte. I don't have this elegant writing process where I research everything. I just feel like I'm a mess. And he said, what if that actually is the creative process? What if that's your creative process? 13 hours on Facebook, I think that's my creative process. Yes. I learn things on Facebook, right? I connect with people. I'm networking. I'm hearing stories. And that was so helpful to me. That broke the dam. And I got the damn book done. Yeah, I was so excited. I actually got the book done on July 2nd. I finished at 4:18 p.m. and I took my test for my black belt at 5 p.m. Yeah, so I was like high on no sleep and Doritos and Swedish fish, and it was amazing that I did it. But this is very important because we tend to glamorize what we think the creative process is. And we look at other people that seem to do it so well. I've looked at Chris Gillibo for so many years. He just makes me sick sometimes, Chris. He's like, God, so productive and just kind of rolls these brilliant things and all his, product launches go so well. And I can have the illusion based on looking at his outside about what his internal process is. But only he knows. And I would bet in our own strangely unique and slightly twisted ways, there's probably a similar type of experience that goes on in Chris's head. It's manifested differently. He may have different thoughts. But what Chris has done is he's learned a way to surf the fear in order to be contributing things to the world that he wants to contribute. And for that, I'm extremely thankful, as I'm sure many of you are as well. The next very, very important thing is choosing your collaborators. If there is one skill that I think will make the greatest difference for each of you in these next 12 months as you're building what you want to build, I think it's about choosing your collaborators. When I was planning to come here, my 6-year-old, Rosie, said, Mom, how many nights are you going to be gone? I said, I think I'll be gone 3 nights. Where are you going? I'm going to Europe. I'm going to Berlin. It's across the ocean. And she said, why? Why are you going? And I said, I want to go to meet my European relatives and to help them. Maybe say something to them that's going to help them to grow in their career. And she said, do they have to take you away from your children? She's very dramatic. She has drama as one of her ingredients. And I said, honey, sometimes it's really important that we actually connect in person, that we make this connection here in person. And she said, can't you just Facebook with them? Because she already gets that I spend a lot of time on Facebook, and we can make those connections. There's something that happens when you're actually collaborating with people in person that is invaluable. And there's 3 circles I want you to think about. One of them is your peer mentors. A small group of people, can be 4 to 5 people, who share similar values and roots, who are absolutely dedicated to your success, who will absolutely call you on your stuff in the way that Michael called me on mine, right? Provide that moment of inspiration, of guidance, right at the moment that you need it, and that through all of your work and effort will allow you to be creating things together. That's your peer mentors. Your technical mentors are people who you can learn very specific skills from. So somebody that might teach you about how to write a sales letter, or somebody who might teach you how to become a coach, or whatever it is that somebody can have a technical knowledge, and you want to be choosing those technical mentors very carefully to make sure that it's somebody that you can learn from that truly will be able to teach you that skill. The last circle are your High Council of Jedi Knights. I love Star Wars. I don't know if any of you have seen the movies. I always imagine how fantastic it would be to walk into a circular room that is filled with my Jedi Knights, where when I'm facing a moment of dilemma, I can go to them and their wisdom and ask for their advice. And there are, I think, people that you can choose to have in that circle for yourself that exhibit the characteristics of having the technical expertise that you really long for, so you can be very you can learn things from them based on the body of work that they've created. But here's the most important thing. They are also people who exhibit the kind of values and who live their life in accordance to the kind of roots that are important to you. And when I was writing my book, or before I wrote it, I had the idea for the book. I went to Washington, D.C., and I met with Dan Pink. Does anybody know Dan Pink, who wrote A Whole New Mind and Drive? I worship Dan Pink. When he said I could come to his house and meet him, I was so excited. I was shaking, and it was a beautiful fall day, and I went outside, and I was sitting with him and talking to him, and then we moved into his kitchen, and we were sitting at his kitchen table, and his wife, Jessica, was at the stove, and she was cooking a pot of soup, and I was talking to him about this idea that I had for this book, Body of Work. I didn't know that was the title yet. So we're talking about different ideas together, and all throughout the conversation, Dan kept looking to his wife, and he thought, Jess, what do you think? What do you think about this title? And so we're having this conversation, and he turns to me and he said, everything that I've ever done, I always run by Jessica because she is the most insightful person, and she helps so much in all of my creative works. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And then his kids started to come home from school, and he would stop our conversation. He went and greeted them and had that connection. At that moment, at that table, Dan went from somebody who I highly admired as a technical mentor to a High Council of Jedi Knight. Because what I saw is that he was living his life according to values that are very important to me. I love my husband dearly, and he's so supportive in the work that I do. And I love to learn from people who also are demonstrating that in their life. It doesn't mean I can't learn from people that are not the same as I am. But for somebody who I'm going to trust with the big questions, I want it to be somebody who has those kinds of characteristics. Your collaborators are very, very important. The next to last skill that you really want to develop, and this is one that changes over time, is to define your own success. It's easy to look at somebody else and what it is that they have created and to try to do that, which is virtually impossible. My definition of success, the simple one, is to enjoy my life while I am living it. Pretty much. So if I say yes to something, I want to show up and I want to fully be present and really enjoy myself. There's a singer named John Legend. Does any of you know John Legend? I'm hoping. Okay, 2 hands in the air. I like you already. All right, we'll talk at the break. John Legend was a management consultant at Boston Consulting Group and did music on the side. He was a very quiet guy who apparently was really good with Excel pivot tables, his coworkers said. And he would quietly hum his music, and I wrote a blog post about him, and there was one of his coworkers, Jane, who said, she used to watch him just silently humming, doing his pivot tables, and he was up for promotion for like a client relationship manager or something. And she thought, wow, he's not too good with people. I don't know if that's going to be really a good role for him. And about 2 years later, when he was busting out of the dry ice at the Grammys, she thought, oh, wow, I guess I was kind of wrong about John Legend. John Legend, who was then John Stevens, had his music as a side hustle. He would play music in church, and he played music on the side. He ended up connecting with Lauryn Hill and later Kanye West, who produced his first album. And after winning 9 Grammys and being a very successful musician, he still stayed very connected to his roots. He was actually a child prodigy. He was homeschooled by his mom. He then went to high school. He graduated at age 16 with honors. And he went to school, he chose his career path, and he's very passionate about education. He was the moderator for TED Education. He has a nonprofit foundation. He speaks up on behalf of politicians that are advocating educational reform. He's speaking at a conference in Florida called ScholarCon, which I'm also speaking at in July, so I think I actually get to meet him. Not that it's about me, this is about John Legend. But what is interesting to me is that he could choose, once he has become massively famous and rich from his music career, to just focus on being rich and famous in his music career. But he stays very connected to his roots and defines his own success as what he does with it. And being so publicly committed to education and being so committed by taking time out to be speaking at an education conference, for example, is something to me that says that you don't need to just be defining success in terms of financial outcomes, or once you reach a certain stage and you're famous and everybody knows you, that's where it stops. It's what are you doing with that? How are you continuing to be influencing people? That said, there's no definition that says you have to become an international recording star. You don't have to become rich and famous. Some of the most successful people I know are stay-at-home moms who are super committed to their families, who do it as a conscious choice, who make crafts. I'm so not crafty. They'll make amazing crafts. They create these experiences for their kids where that is what they choose to do in their life. And that for them is the kind of definition of success that makes sense. And I admire that so much. So for you, what you want to be thinking about is how can you define success in such a way that it's meaningful and significant to you and only you. The last skill is really about telling and selling your story. And this is probably the meta skill of the 21st century. And it's really how it is that you can be narrating your life and your body of work. How are you telling a story about what it all means? Because for anything significant that you want to do in life, if you want to get a job, if you want to fund your Kickstarter campaign, if you want to use $10 in a laptop and build a business. If you want to have a conversation and make a connection with somebody, it's all about how it is that you're telling a story. How are you forming that connection? And so developing a story and a narrative about your body of work is a critically important thing. And I think there's two parts of the story. There's the story that you tell yourself. Who am I? Why am I doing this? Do I have what it takes? Am I meaningful? Do I have a right to do this work? And then there's the story that you choose to tell the outside world about it. And so how you tell the story is a critically important part of how it is that you actually make things happen. You can be super smart, you can have the best ingredients, you can have the best idea for a project, you want to create something. If you're not able to tell a story in such a way to move people to action, then it won't happen. If Yana had not been able to tell people something in a way that moved them to action, none of you would be here. Obviously the story worked, right? Because you're here. So that is something that you really want to be developing. And Greg and I were actually having this conversation yesterday in a cafe, and given his unique circumstances, I was asking him, I said, have you ever thought about how you want to be narrating your story? I would love to hear it. I would love to hear Greg's reflection and his experience about what his life meant and how it is that he viewed those particular threads coming together. Because each of us are going to take something from his story in the way that he shared it that moved us a different way. But part of what you want to do, part of your legacy, is leaving the story that you want to tell and not have somebody else tell it for you. When I was writing my book and interviewing my dad, we talked a lot about his work life, but we also talked about his community life. And after my parents divorced, he moved to a small town in California called Port Costa with about 200 people. And there was no curbside recycling program there. So my dad has been a big environmentalist his whole life. And so for 13 years as a volunteer, he and a few other volunteers picked up people's recycling every 2 weeks for 13 years. The money that they earned by collecting those recyclables, they put in a bank account. And then there was a 100-year-old school that sat right at the top of town. It was one main street, so when you ride in to town, there was an old school. And it was totally falling apart. It hadn't been used since 1966. So these community volunteers, including my dad, purchased the school. And for the last 30 years, they have been carefully restoring it. Through physical labor, through fundraisers, they do talent shows. My dad is dressed in drag and tap dance in front of all his friends and peers. It's one of his ingredients. They've done art shows. They have done car shows to raise money for the school. And so through a period of 30 years, they have slowly been restoring a school. It's not totally done, but it's a beautiful, beautiful building. And so I was actually sitting in the school with my dad and reflecting on all the things that he had done. I said, Dad, why in the world would you spend 30 years and so much labor and so much time and energy living through cancer? He actually tore both rotator cuffs as he was doing a cleanup one day, lifting trash into a dumpster when he was probably 70-something years old. I said, why would you do that? And he was really quiet for a period of time. He's very introverted, my dad. And then he just pointed to the building. And he said, have you seen this building? This is meant to be an institution of learning. And at that moment, I had a very profound realization. As a daughter of this beautiful man, which was, I had grown up with the role model of somebody saying, if there is something that needs to be done, do it, whether somebody is paying you or not. That was the gift that my dad gave me and that he continues to give me. So for you, what I ask that you reflect on is, what do you feel needs to be created? How do you want to change things? Let's build it, and let's get started. Thank you.